Okay, I'm going to do a cursory overview of the RD1 scrubber canister, which may not be so obvious from just looking at pictures on the internet and elsewhere. So this should walk through several features and specifications and some of the operational information you would need to get into the scrubber. So to start, it's basically just a can. So we'll start outside and work our way in. It's protected with a neoprene sleeve. This may or may not provide any insulation value, but at the least it's good for some impact protection and prevent from scratching the or dinging up the canister itself. So, and that's important because the canister is it's cast acrylic. It's very thick. It's almost a 1/2 inch thick walled cast acrylic, so it's very durable, very rugged. But we went with that so that it's transparent. So you can see how well you pack the scrubber. You can see if it's particularly wet after a dive. You can see if the material has channeled through the course of transporting the unit in a car, by vessel, or backpack, or whatever. And importantly, you can see that the O-rings that seal either end of the canister are well seated, not pinched, misplaced, or there's any junk sitting on the sealing surface. So each end of the can has a double O-ring seal. So it's a very snug fit, very positive waterproofing mechanism, very obvious to see if there are any failures with closing up the canister. On each end, each lid, and they're identical, there are some ports. So we have two, these are 3/8 NPT port. So NPT is a tapered thread, which allow any variety of basically hardware store fittings to fit if it came down to that in the field. But we also offer a customized 3/8 NPT that adds an O-ring, so we are able to fully seat the taper and then seal these with O-rings. And we have a variety of bushings or pass-throughs to penetrate either side of the canister. So those are pass-throughs for gas additions, cables to sensor harnesses, and so on. We also offer two different hose connection styles at the scrubber. This is a cam lock fitting, just a standard industrial cam lock fitting, which I like. It's very robust. We also offer a threaded fitting, which I don't have on the bench at the moment, but the threaded version would be an O-ring seated elbow with a nut to lock it in place. And the lid is the same on either end of the canister. What I tend to do is label the inhalation lid with a green dot. Green is good, or green is clean. Green is the fresh gas that's passed through the scrubber. So this is our inhalation lid. And then on the exhalation side, we do a red dot. So red is the CO2 rich or oxygen depleted gas prior to passing through the scrubber bed. On this particular unit, on the exhale side, I've fit a manual water evacuation pump. This mechanism has kind of lost popularity over the last couple decades, but at one point in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were pumps installed on several units as a means to dewater from a low point or water accumulation spot in the rebreather. In this case, with RD1, it's a horizontally positioned scrubber. So, through the dive and accumulating condensation and just metabolic water from the reaction in the scrubber, it can get a little bit sloppy in there after several hours of diving. So there's a couple ways to deal with that. One is to use a sponge or some chamois material to absorb that on the exhale side. The other way is with this pump. So I simply lean left, get all of that sloshy stuff down low positioned near where the pumps fit, and pump, and water will pump out, and once I start pumping bubbles, I know we're back to dry. So it's a really nice feature, particularly on long dives, to give you some extra peace of mind. On the inhalation lid, this is a particularly fancy one that's configured for something very special, but I can point out a number of things we've done here. So we have what I call a washdown gland. So this is a pass-through that we've done that allows you to run cables or wires through the lid, and it's just an ambient pressure pass-through. So you can see there, we just have a display cable going to a Molex harness, pass through the unit. There's a double O-ring seal in there to prevent any inadvertent leaks. And that fitting is actually a garden hose, US garden hose male fitting. So at the end of the day, and I've shown this on other videos, you can hook up a garden hose and flush out the entire unit quite conveniently. On the interior, we have a sensor carriage, which can hold up to 4 oxygen sensors. And the best fit we found are just standard R22 Molex style sensors. We get up to 3 of those, or up to 4 of those in there. There are other things we can do with diluent gas flush mechanisms, and then in this case, this is a special system. This is actually a fan to help circulate the gas through a larger volume rebreather that we use for certain specific applications. So everything's quite modular. The entire carriage just friction fits and pops out, so you can configure these to do all kinds of things. This one's a little bit messy with the way we have all the wires. We also have power for the fan going there, but the idea is we want something that's field friendly, easy to fix on the fly, hardware store friendly if you need to change fittings or block a port and don't have one in your Save a Dive kit, and very adaptable. So this can be configured for all kinds of things, different sensor positions, whether they be higher or lower, or the scrubber's horizontal or vertical, or side mounted, or whatever you want to do with it. So to open the scrubber, there are these thumb screws, and we have 2 on either lid. You only have to open the inhale side on a routine basis to fill the canister. So these are just standard 1/4-20 screws you can find at any hardware store. We provide plastic ones with the unit, but we have folks using stainless ones. It really doesn't matter so much. So it's just a 1/4-20 threaded screw. And then we have these recesses for a wedge to break the seal on those O-rings. So you can really use anything as a wedge. We do provide a wedge tool with the units. And if the O-rings have been sitting a while, obviously it's a little more snug. But we keep them well greased. We just wedge, open that seal, and then the lid will come right out. So that's the inhalation lid removed. We set that aside. And then this is the inside of our scrubber canister. It's very simple, very straightforward, just a threaded rod run through the center of the can. So it's just a bucket, nothing special about it, except that it is dimensioned to meet some specific requirements. So obviously each lid, as you saw, is dimensioned to hold certain accessory components on the inside, but then the canister itself has some unique engineering that's gone into it. So part of that is that in general it'll hold about 2.5 kilograms of softener lime. And the other important thing we did is that the cross-sectional area, when passing through media, is approximately the same as the cross-sectional area of an 1.5" ID breathing hose. So there's very, very little added resistance going through this particular diameter canister. So to retain media in this can is just a series of discs. The bottom disc, you can see the plastic retaining disc, the mesh screen. This is just a wrap of tape to keep those together. We also provide a gasket, which I have here to show as an example on this end. It's a 3/8 straight threaded rod. So one thing to check as you're assembling your canister, if the lower hardware is loose and this plate's jiggling around, then you won't be able to tighten your wing nut down. So it's important just to check that. All that looks fine. That seats down into the bottom of the canister. Then we will go fill the bucket and button her up. So when filling the scrubber, we're just using a loose fill soft lime. This is 812 mesh. We would fill till it just crests over that threaded rod, which is similar to other units. And then of course we do our tap, tap, tap. And if you tap on the low side of the media, that tends to be the direction that the media travels. So if you have a low side, tap, 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 the media will go in that direction. And this doesn't have to be too aggressive. We just want to be able to then see that threaded rod and make sure that there's enough room to reinstall the screen and the retaining disc. So after initial tap, I probably have over 1/2 inch of threaded rod visible. I can add a little bit more media, which I will do now. I just recovered the threaded rod. Do some more tap, tap, tapping, and now I'll install the screen. So it was one initial fill, cover the threaded rod, tap, 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 top it up to just crest over the rod, tap, tap, tap. And we could probably get more in there, but this is a good place to call it, and it's more than enough soft lime to do what we need to do. So as we close it up, we want to check these the O-ring seal on the inside of the canister. So I'll just wipe my thumb, and there's some residual crystal loop there from the O-ring. So I just smooth all that out, make sure there's no dust or granules stuck on the sealing surface. Then we take our screen, and the screen has a silicone mesh seal around the perimeter to help prevent any media from getting around it. So we put that screen in place, then the retaining disc in place, and you notice we still have a couple threads visible to work with for our hardware. So we go a washer and a lock washer, and then a wing nut. And if we have trouble with the wing nut because it's very full, we can remove the lock washer, go with the wing nut just to get things started. So we're going to continue our tapping, get everything packed down well, tighten her up a little bit, and then actually remove the wing nut because everything is settled. Go back to the lock washer, and then the wing nut will fit, no problem. this unit, it's a little on the full side, so I'm gonna wrestle with that lock washer a little bit, but it's not a huge deal. Okay, so now we've got the wing nut in place. We're inspecting around the perimeter of the scrubber, around that top mesh, to see that the media is level all the way around. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it pretty close to level. Make sure there's no channeling, no big gaps. We can push down that screen a little bit. We can continue tapping to get the media migrated where we want it, and then just snug up that wing nut. And then that's basically our full scrubber canister. Then I will check the O-ring sealing surface one final time. I'll check the O-rings on the lid, just run a clean finger, which will take care of any grit, sand, debris. And then I line up the the set screw holes, close her up, and then take the thumb screws or set screws. You just go finger tight on either side. And she's full. So that's a ready to dive RD1 scrubber canister, and that's about how much media we consider full. So you still have about ½ an inch or so of space between the bed and the inhalation lid. We could go with a longer threaded rod to pack more media in there, but I found that little bit of space is actually helpful when inspecting the canister post-dive before you break everything down. So you can take a peek in there, you can see how much condensate is on the inhalation side, look at your cells without opening up the whole system. It's just a nice sneak peek into the interior of what your unit's doing. But this is a ton of media, 2.5 kilos, possibly a little bit more if you did a really tight job packing. And we'll talk more about scrubber duration philosophy and theory in another video.